Get ready, it's time. What's up, guys? My name's Brandon McNulty. I'm a writer. I'm the author of Bad Parts. I'm also the author of the short story 10-Year Photo, which I'm going to be talking about later on in this video. It just released this past week. It came out in the anthology of Gods and Globes Volume 2, and if you are interested in picking up a copy, either to support me or the channel, or if you're just interested, I'll link it in the description below. But today we're going to talk about the subject of writing stories about time travel, and these can be very tricky because there are so many things to take into account and all kinds of time paradoxes and other things that'll just drive you nuts. But I want to give you some tips that'll simplify the process and help you decide whether you want to write a story about time travel and how you should go about executing such a story. So the first thing you need to be aware of if you are writing about time travel, you need to ask yourself the question, why? Why am I writing about time travel? Because oftentimes you don't necessarily need to incorporate time travel elements into your story. Instead of writing a story about someone going to the past, maybe you just really want to write about historical fiction. Maybe you just want to write a story that's set back there and you don't need anybody from the present day in that setting. Or if you're writing about somebody going to the future, maybe you're actually just better off writing a story about a future society or writing about the apocalypse or whatever it is. Oftentimes writers don't want to write about time travel so much as they want to write about different time periods or different futures. So keep that in mind if you ever are in the situation where you think you have a good idea for a time travel story. Is the time travel really necessary? And if you do decide to write a story about time travel, ask yourself, what are my characters going to learn from this story? Why are they going back or forward in time? What is the purpose of all this? And typically characters who make time jumps, they're going to learn some lesson. Maybe they go to the past and they learn to appreciate the future more, or they go to the future and they learn to change themselves before the world gets to be a worse place. Like if you ever think of Scrooge in A Christmas Carol, the ghost of Christmas future shows him the future, what the world will be like if he continues to act the way he does, and then when he comes back he has a change of heart. Things like that are very important to consider when you start writing a time travel story. Another important thing to remember is that you have to establish the rules of time travel in your story. Who is capable of time travel? How many people can use time travel? Is there a specific device you need, or is there a magic spell? What are the consequences of using time travel? What if they get stuck in time? Can they get stuck in time? All those different questions need to be asked and need to be answered by the writer before you really get into the storytelling. Because if you don't understand the rules of time travel in your story, your readers are going to see through it. They're going to see it as this fake story that they're not going to buy into. You want to sell the idea, and you need to stick to the rules if you're going to do that. Another question to ask yourself is, how seriously do you want to take time travel in your story? It's totally fine if you just want to write a story about time travel and it's fun and lighthearted and it doesn't really get into the nitty-gritty of how it works. I mean, for instance, the story Groundhog Day is just Bill Murray reliving the same day over and over and over again until he finally becomes a better person. They never actually explain how the time travel works in that story or why it exists or anything like that, but nobody really complains about that because it's just a great story. It's a lot of fun. However, if you are writing the type of story that is much more serious and scientific, you're going to want to do your research, get your details correct, because those types of audiences will be much more critical of you, and if you get anything wrong, it'll just take them right out of the story. Once you establish your story rules, you need to decide what type of time travel story you're going to write. The most common one is the story where someone from the present goes back in time to the past. And if you are writing this type of story, you're actually writing a historical fiction story with a little bit of a sci-fi twist because you're including that time travel. And if you're going to write a great historical fiction story, you need to research the time period you're writing about. You need to be very knowledgeable of it. You need to research, how they lived their daily lives back then. What was the technology like? What was the world in general like? What kind of expectations did they have for the future? What were the social customs? And so on and so on. And if you are writing a story about the past, you should find a way to get your readers invested in that time period. One of the best ways to do it is to get the details right and to get a good feel for what this story world is. Try and present life as it was so that your readers can truly appreciate it. One major thing to be aware of if you are writing stories about characters who go to the past is the butterfly effect. And by this I mean, if you have a time traveler who goes to the past, every change they make to this world will have consequences for the future. Now, depending on how many timelines your story has, I mean, this might not matter, or it might matter greatly, but I'm not going to get into timelines because I don't want to overcomplicate this video. But basically, the important thing to remember, if you do have people going into the past, remember that if they kill someone, or they prevent someone from being killed, or they stop Marty McFly's parents from going to the dance together, that will have consequences in the future. So keep that in mind if you are writing stories that take place in the past. The next type of time travel story is one where characters go from the present into the future. And they may go into the future for various reasons. Maybe they just go from the hell of it because they invented a time machine that can take them into the future. Or they might have to go to the future in order to stop some future evil from occurring. And typically with those types of stories, they can get a little weird because you have to ask yourself the question, okay, well, if they have to go into the future to stop this evil from happening, why don't they just take precautions now? Or why don't they just wait for the future to come to them? So if you are looking at this type of story, ask yourself, is it necessary for the future time travel to happen? Now, aside from time travel stories where your main characters go into the past or into the future, there's also a third type where your characters just stay in the present, and another character, usually a villain, comes to the present, either from the future or the past, and starts causing problems. The best example of this is Terminator 1, which is an 80s movie that takes place during the 80s, but the main conflict arises because a machine comes from the future to kill Sarah Connor in the present. And because we're grounded in this present world, there isn't a whole lot of world building early on, and we can instantly empathize with Sarah Connor. It's another technique you can keep in your arsenal if you are thinking about time travel stories. Just be aware that you do have to do the proper world building for the future or the past, even if you're just bringing one or two characters into that present. And then the fourth and final type of time travel story is one where there is a time travel gimmick involved. For instance, in the movie Groundhog Day, the gimmick is that Bill Murray's character repeats the same day over and over and over again until he becomes a better person. Another example would be in the video game The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. And this is about a fantasy world that is about to be destroyed in 3 days when the moon crashes into Earth. However, the main character, Link, can play an ocarina in order to go back in time 3 days and repeat the process until he can finally solve the problem. Another great example of a time travel gimmick is from my story 10-Year Photo, which I mentioned at the beginning of the video. And this is a story about a group of college bandmates who stumble upon a website that can predict their futures with chilling accuracy. All they have to do is upload a photo of themselves, and that photo gets sent into the future, and what they get in return is a picture of themselves from 10 years from now. And this gimmick is what drives the story and what causes these characters to make a series of dark and desperate decisions. And if you are interested in reading 10-Year Photo, you can pick up a copy of the anthology of Gods and Globes Volume 2. I'll link it in the description below. There are a lot of great sci-fi and fantasy stories in there from a variety of authors, so definitely check it out if you're interested in my story or if you want to support the channel. Question of the day, what is your all-time favorite time travel story? Let us know in the comments section below. Thank you guys for watching. Be sure to check out my other videos. Hit the like and subscribe buttons for me. Share this video with a friend. Pick up a copy of Bad Parts if you haven't already. And be sure to check out Of Gods and Globes Volume 2 as well. And as always, remember to keep on writing.